Welcome back to another episode of CrossTalk, 6th Plymouth District. And as we have a regular conversation with State Representative Josh Cutler. Representative, it's been a while. How are you?
I know it has been. It's been too long, Kevin. Thank you for having me back on the show. It's a pleasure to see you and to have a chance to talk with friends out in Whitman Hanson Cable Access. We appreciate all the great work you guys do.
Let's talk a little bit about what have you been up to? Here we are. It's we're closing in on the holidays. Actually, we have passed by Thanksgiving, and we're coming up on Christmas and Kwanzaa and Festivus.
I've been checking my list and checking it twice, and I forget the rest. No, it's been a busy time. Although it's always wonderful. This time of year, there's so many tree lightings and holiday events. It really is a nice time here on the South Shore and certainly in Hanson and throughout the district. So always look forward to this time. It's also a chance to kind of try to wrap up things for the end of the legislative year. Obviously, we're in a 2-year session, but we do try to wrap things up by the end of this year. And so it's been a busy time, but a great time. And we've been I think there's lots that we can look to be proud of, but also a lot of work certainly still ahead.
Let's kick things off by talking about a program that is, being proposed, a 4-day work week. This would be the Massachusetts Registered Apprenticeship Week, or is that something else?
So two different things. Happy to talk about both of them.
Yep.
So the 4-day work week legislation is something that I had filed along with a colleague earlier this term, and we recently had a public hearing on the bill before the Labor and Workforce Development Committee just earlier, actually late in November. And so, Kevin, it's an interesting concept, and I wanted to have a chance to kind of explain it because I think it's a kind of something that's worth talking about. And not to get into a long history lesson, but if you think about the nature of our work week and labor laws and so forth, a lot of what we know of today is a traditional 40-hour work week, which I understand is not typical for everybody, but is for the most part, dates back to a federal law that was passed in 1939, the Fair Labor Standards Act. I believe it was under the Roosevelt administration, and that basically codified the 40-hour work week, overtime laws, child labor laws, the basic things that we think of today. And essentially, not much has changed since then. A lot has changed, but in terms of those expectations in that rubric, this 40-hour work week, not a lot has changed back, 80 plus years. We think, given and you look at all the changes in productivity and technology that have happened since then, it's enormous. Just to compare, the levels of productivity we have today to what we were seeing back then. And, with the pandemic, we've seen, sort of a reevaluation of the nature of work. A lot of folks now working in a hybrid work environment. We're having, this Zoom in a hybrid way. It's really changed the face of work. And so it seemed like an opportune time to take a look at, not just the idea of where we work, but when we work and how long we work. And so we filed legislation to create a pilot program to look at a 4-day work week. Now, some people may love that idea. Some people may, not be such a fan. What we've done, and just to stress it, it's a pilot program. So it's nothing, that's going to change overnight. And it's a voluntary program. So no one's forced to do this that doesn't want to try to participate. But basically, we want to take a look at and really get some data to see how this could work here in Massachusetts if we were to implement something like this, and what industries it might work in, which ones it might be less workable, and so forth, and really have some robust data to look at that. We've seen other jurisdictions in the UK. They did a major study. They've done some studies in Europe. There hasn't been a ton in other states, so we're kind of ahead of the curve here in Massachusetts. But looking at this idea of a 4-day work week, and the data has been really surprising. It's been really very popular, both with workers, but also surprising with a lot of businesses too that have been able to maintain productivity but had happier employees, leading to a better work-life balance. And we know that with the labor shortages that we see today, finding workers can be, the biggest challenge for many businesses. And so in retaining workers too. And so having employees that are happy on the job, really does pay benefits, not just for the employee, but for the business. So That's sort of it in a nutshell, Kevin. And I want to, so people think of what is a 4-day work week? Well, it doesn't just mean lopping one day off. It doesn't just mean scrunching 40 hours of work into 4 days, which I know, some in some occupations that is the norm, and that certainly can work for folks. But what we're talking about is a really a meaningful reduction in the overall number of hours worked without a resultant loss in pay, benefits, or status. So that's what the bill calls for. And what it would do is create a pilot program that would be run by the state that would allow businesses to voluntarily sign up, and in return, they would agree to provide data to the state on regular intervals about how the program is working for them, how their employees feel about it, how it's affecting their business. And we would do this over the course of 2 years in order to have some really robust data to look at. We would also direct the Executive Office of Labor to ensure that we had a diverse group of businesses participating, both in terms of size, industry type, geography, ownership type, you name it, so that we could really have a good sense of how this could work in Massachusetts. And then, at the end of that time, we can really look at the data and make some decisions if we think it's something that's worthwhile to take a look at and move forward with. So that's in a nutshell the legislation. And had a hearing just recently. We've been working with a professor at BC who's been very involved in this, and some other groups that have done a lot of work and research on this issue. And I think it's an interesting issue, and I think it's worth kind of really trying to wrap our brains around a little bit to see if it's something we should pursue. Because when you think about, I think about the Jetsons, and you're old enough to remember that show, right, Kevin?
I am.
All of our, perhaps not all of our viewers were old enough to remember that show, but you had all these time-saving technologies that were supposed to make our lives so much better and so much easier, and we're still working the same amount of time we worked back, pre-Jetsons, and so I don't think it's a crazy idea to think about trying to change that. I'm sure back in 1939, when people talked about going from a 60 or 50-hour work week to a 40-hour work week, there were some folks who thought that was crazy and that could never work. And how can we, sustain our productivity and our place, in the world's nations and our economy by doing that? And obviously, we've proven that was okay. It's worked out just well. So, we think it's time to take another look at that.
Well, my follow-up question too would be, one, is there some kind of a tax incentive for businesses that decide to enroll and be a part of this pilot program? And do you already have businesses that have enrolled? What kind of success have you had in getting businesses to be involved in the program?
Yeah, good question. So there is. So the legislation does call for the Executive Office of Labor to create a tax incentive, some sort of incentive, recognizing that we're asking these employers to, do some extra work, really provide quite a bit of data to the state. And so in return for that, we would come up with a tax incentive that they would design to incentivize them to participate. And again, just stress, this is a voluntary program. No business would be forced to do this. They would volunteer to do it. If it was oversubscribed, meaning if there were too many businesses that want to participate, we would, keep a reasonable number, ensuring that we had a diverse group of different types of businesses. And also, even if an employer decided to participate, if some of the workers at that company didn't want to participate, it didn't want to provide the data, no one would be forced to do so. So it would be totally voluntary. In terms of the second part of your question, so it's funny. Once the bill was filed this spring, and it got a fair amount of attention, and immediately after it was filed, I got a bunch of emails from just different sort of random businesses, some parts of the state, asking how they could participate. And I had to explain, well, number one, it's just a bill right now. We have to get it passed, which is, not always a simple process. And then, there would be a whole, educational campaign to inform businesses. So my anecdotal evidence is that there would be a lot of interest, because I think there's some businesses that are already doing this sort of thing. And again, I think just with the nature of the pandemic, it's forced us to reevaluate. And because of the labor shortage we're seeing, when you're trying to retain talent, you have to get creative sometimes. And this is one way that some businesses are doing that. So I think there would be a lot of interest. We'll find out, if and when the legislation gets passed and signed into law. But I think it's a good way to take this step sort of as a pilot program to see how this could work in Massachusetts.
I was going to follow up asking about the registered apprenticeship week, but what I want to do, I think I want to kind of push it to the back burner and talk a little bit about something that we've had many conversations about, and that is in the works right now, and that is House Bill 4109, the act relative to salary wage transparency, aka the Francis Perkins Workplace Equity Act. Where are things with that right now, with that piece?
Sure, that's a great segue, Kevin, for reasons you may not even be aware of, which is that Frances Perkins was a Massachusetts resident. She was the first woman to serve in a presidential cabinet. She had a really remarkable career, and she's actually was the Secretary of Labor under President Roosevelt when the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed, and I think she played a pretty big role in that. So you're a master of the segue, and as always. So well done, sir. But so to answer your question, the Frances Perkins Workplace Equity Act is legislation that I filed at the urging of some constituents, and basically it would do a couple things. The most basic thing is that it would require employers to provide a salary range when they post a job for hire. It's as simple as that. So when you're hiring someone for any kind of job, you just simply would include the salary range. It's already a pretty common practice we see in many businesses and many of the positions that the state advertises. They already do this. You do see it more and more in private sector businesses, and it's pretty easy to comply. And the reason we're doing this, Kevin, is twofold. One is, if you look at the historical wage gap that we've seen, and it's quantifiable. You can look at the evidence and see that, women and people of color simply don't earn as much as their counterparts in often cases for the same exact type of position. And so trying to close that gender and racial wage gap has been something that we've been trying to do here in Massachusetts and, of course, around the country. And back in 2017, Governor Baker signed into law a pretty big bill that we've done to make some changes, and some real progress was made there. But we are still seeing sort of persistent gender and racial wage gaps. And so one way that, the evidence shows us that we can help to solve that is to have more transparency with wages. When people are operating from a level playing field, when everybody knows what the salary range for a given position is, going in, everyone's, treated more equitably, and we have more transparency with that. So, that has been shown to be a real change agent for that. And also, there's a business benefit. When you are the employer and you're going through the salary, the hiring process, and I've been there myself. I ran a small business for 10 years before being elected to the legislature. And I can remember, I would advertise a position, and you screen the candidates, and you find some resumes that you like, and you bring them in, and you have the interview, and you talk to folks, and maybe you come up with a short list of finalists. And then, at some point you talk about the salary. It's typically, not typically done in the first interview. It's usually when you get towards the end. And then sometimes you'd find out, especially when I was running a business, it was a small business, and we couldn't always afford to, have the salaries that we perhaps wanted to, that the salary expectations and the salary reality were just on two different places. And so you've gone through that whole process, and wasted your own time and the applicant's time, and just to realize that you weren't a fit on the salary, and you couldn't make it work. And so wouldn't it be nice to know that at the outset? And so, you've seen this movement, organically, of people posting salary ranges to avoid that. So, going in, okay, this position pays between X and Y. And so, going in, that's the range. And certainly, if you're the worker, you want to advocate for the higher end of the range. And if your employer, maybe you're looking at a different number, but at least that range going in. The issue has been that, for some types of industries or some types of employers, voluntarily doing that can create problems, because you're potentially putting yourself at a disadvantage to other businesses in your industry. And so if everyone is under the same operating rules, and in other words, if everyone is operating on the same law that says you disclose the salary range, and that issue is removed. And so, everyone can do this, and without fear of being at a competitive disadvantage. And so that's the basics of the bill. It would basically require just simply that employers provide that salary range when they're advertising a position or for a promotion for someone. It does have an exemption for employers that are 25 or fewer employees. So in the case I was giving of a small business, they would actually be exempt from the law. Now, we hope everyone would comply, and we think it's a smart thing to do, and it's good public policy. But we did make a decision that we wanted to make sure we weren't creating, a burden for smaller employers, especially, those under 25 employees. I don't think this is really much of a burden to begin with, but we did exempt small employees. So that's important to state because I think that's not always been clear. There's also some other components to the bill, Kevin. It would create some new data reporting procedures to ensure that, larger employers, and we're talking about employers of 100 or more employees, there's something called the Equal Opportunity Commission at the federal level, and there are EEO forms that are filed by certain employers. So the bill would call for those forms that are already filed with the federal EEO Commission to be filed here in Massachusetts as well, and then that data would be aggregated. It would not be individually accessible. It'd be aggregated and it'd be published by the state, so we could see, different industries, what kind of progress is being made, and where the salary data, what it's showing. So the old saying, you can't fix something if you can't measure it. So that's part of the bill, is to try to make sure we're measuring and looking at that data. So it has the salary range component, and then the data reporting component in the bill, which I'm proud to say I was originally the sponsor of the bill. We filed it in the House 2 terms ago. A constituent from Duxbury who was very integral to bringing this issue forward, and she's been wonderful to work with, and we've had a lot of support and grassroots coalition growing up since then. The House passed this bill earlier this fall, and the Senate then followed suit shortly thereafter, and now it's before a conference committee to kind of work out some very small differences between the two different bills, which is what we're currently doing. And I'm the chair of the conference committee on the House side, so we're trying to hopefully get this wrapped up, hopefully in the short term.
How important is it that you are actually appointed by the Speaker to be a part of that conference committee? That's large.
Yeah, no, I was really proud of that because it's a big deal to be the lead negotiator on a piece of legislation, representing the House, with our friends in the Senate, and so it's not something I've had a chance to do too often. So I was really proud to be selected for that role by the Speaker, and we have a good it's a 3 so the way the process works, not to get too far in the weeds for your viewers, and I don't want your ratings to drop, Kevin, but the way it works, for any time you have it's good. I guess it's good for all of us to remember our civics. When you have a bill that's passed by one branch and then the other branch, they appoint a conference committee to work out the differences between the two bills. And it typically, here in Massachusetts at least, it's a 6-member conference committee. So you have 3 members from the House, which is typically 2 members of the majority party and 1 member of the minority party. And then same thing, mirroring that on the Senate side, 2 members and then 1 member. So 6 total. And so we're tasked with, finding consensus on the bill, and then we issue what's called a conference committee report, which then has an up or down vote in both branches. They can't be amended any further, and then it gets enacted and sent to the governor. So it's a lot of responsibility. We want to make sure every little period and statute and reference is 100% accurate, because there's not any opportunity after this to change it until it gets to the governor's desk. So it's a lot of responsibility, and I'm enjoying being part of that and leading that for the House.
Let's pay off the tease. I teased about the Registered Apprenticeship Week. What exactly is that?
Yeah. So again, we're on a roll, Kevin. No. So we just recently concluded Registered Apprenticeship Week here in Massachusetts, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something that I think increasingly, we know apprenticeships have been around, since the Middle Ages or even before. We think about the journeyman, the apprenticeship, and so forth. But I think they're getting renewed attention for a number of reasons here in Massachusetts, and not just in Massachusetts, but across the country. And at the federal level, we have something called a registered apprenticeship, which is simply an apprenticeship that an employer sets up that they then register with the Commonwealth, which conveys some benefits and allows the employee to then have a transferable certificate, a transferable apprenticeship that's recognized, that can be recognized and taken to another position if they so choose. So, we think about the whole 4-year education program. I'm a good example. I went and got a liberal arts degree at a great college and stuff. And I racked up a lot of debt doing that. And so, and for some folks, that may not be the optimal route. And, the apprenticeship model where, you're getting learning on the job, work-based learning. In most cases, you're getting paid while you're doing that. And at the end of that process, you emerge, with the education in that profession. You've, not accrued a lot of school debt, and you have, these great skills. And we think of apprenticeships as being just in the trades, the building trades, and they have done, to their credit, a tremendous job over the years of developing apprenticeship programs, and more recently really trying to diversify those programs, and I applaud that. But apprenticeships, can apply. I've visited high-tech companies in the Seaport in Boston that use this apprenticeship model as a way to find good employees. And again, it comes back to this labor shortage that we're experiencing, and it's here to stay. Unfortunately, it's just the numbers game. Our baby boom generation is aging out of the workforce, and in most cases into retirement, and that's a big amount of folks who are in many cases out of the workforce now, and that's not going to, chronologically, that's not changing, and so we do need to be creative about how we find our workforce, and that's something we've talked about in the past. And so apprenticeships really offer a great model and a proven model for providing that workforce, diversifying that workforce, and also helping that workforce to find the skills and not end up with crushing student debt. So increasingly, for a lot of different types of professions, and maybe even non-traditional professions, like in the healthcare sector and the high-tech sector, we're seeing the apprenticeship model really working. I had an opportunity recently to go down to the Cape and visit a partnership between Cape Cod Community College and Cape Cod Hospital with the legislators down there about a phlebotomist apprenticeship that they just wrapped up, and they had the first cohort of students who had concluded their apprenticeship. And it's great. These are important skills, positions that we need to fill that we're sometimes having trouble filling. They're mostly entry level, but they're not always entry level. They can be in other types of positions. And these folks are getting those skills. The employers are getting a talented workforce that now has the skills that they need to fill those jobs. And these folks have a skill now that they can take wherever they want to go. And so it's a great model. And I think we're trying to have a renewed focus on apprenticeships and the registered apprenticeship approach in the Commonwealth to ensure that folks have basic standards for these apprenticeships, and that there's some monitoring, and that there's portability of transferability of the skills. So we recently celebrated Apprenticeship Week here in Massachusetts and across the country, actually. And I think it's just something I wanted to use this opportunity while I have a chance to talk to some of your viewers to tout the program, because I think it's a great model for employers and for employees as well.
Well, you look at, one thing that you had mentioned was, a lot of individuals coming out of college crushing debt. But the other thing that they hear from a lot of employers is, well, you don't have the experience. And it
Right.
seems as though that's kind of a nice 1-2 punch to be able to solve that problem, where you have individuals who, went to school, but need to find, that experience, if this is a way for them to circumvent that and still be able to flood the workforce with given talent. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'll just using myself as an example. I'm 52 years old. I was 53, will be 53 in January, and I literally just paid off my last law school loan. So and I'm fortunate. I'm sure there's others who are that will take even longer. When I came out of law school, I didn't really have a lot of experience because I've been going to law school, and so you're right. When you have an apprenticeship where you're able to kind of get that on the job training, it's a double win. So I'm not downplaying the importance of higher education. Obviously it's very important. There's a lot of benefits. I feel blessed myself, but there's other models out there that can work for folks, and I think we need to be not one shouldn't be at the downfall of the other, and they're both good models.
Let's touch upon one last labor finance type thing. That's the paid family medical leave. There's an update to that, kind of a topping off. Explain.
Yeah, so another important issue, again, a bit of a niche issue, but I thought it was important to bring up. Here in Massachusetts, we have paid family and medical leave. I'll just reiterate that because sometimes people don't realize that we do have that benefit here in Massachusetts. It was part of the quote unquote grand bargain that was passed 3-4 years ago now. It's been in effect for about 2 years, and we recently made a tweak. The way it works here in Massachusetts is some employers participate in the state's run PFML program, and other employers operate their own programs as long as they're, meet the same standards. They're allowed to do that. And so one of the issues that we identified is for folks who may have their own benefits at work that they've accrued because of not sick time, excuse me, but paid time off, personal days, vacation days, whatever. That when they use PFML, because it doesn't reimburse you for the 100% of your salary. It's about 80% of the salary. And so, we were seeing some folks who were reluctant to maybe tap into PFML, or using, or some companies that were reluctant to sign up for the state program because their employees wouldn't get quite the same benefit. And so we've tweaked the law to allow what's called topping off. It's the simplest way to kind of explain it, so that employees can apply for PFML benefits and use their existing earned benefits from their employer to top off their wages, so they can get up to 100% of their salary while they're out on paid leave for, a family issue or a medical issue of their own, or their immediate family. And so it's an important change that allows this to happen. It was something it wasn't done with the original law, and I think it was, just an omission. So we've corrected that. And so we now allow topping off. So, if you're an employee looking to PFML, you can use your existing, you had to have earned existing time off, but you can use that to top off your wages so that you get full reimbursement in total. So I think it was an important change to help support the PFML law. And hopefully, it'll help more employers want to join the state-run plan, because I think there's a lot of benefits to that for both the Commonwealth and for employers. And so now that we have this topping off, I think that will make it more attractive to do so.
As folks are tuning in, we have a couple more things that we're going to touch upon, including, as we close out, we'll find out about the nifty background. That,
yes, I was going to say.
we're going to touch upon that, but a couple of more pieces of business. Let's talk about the passing of John Walsh, a gentleman who was a titan in the Democratic Party, somebody who was well known. Talk about his passing.
Yeah, no, I was very sad that John Walsh passed away. Who's someone I for viewers who may not be aware, and not to get partisan here, but he was a well-known Democratic leader and policymaker and campaign person, and former state party chair. He actually kind of got his start in Plymouth County here. And he was someone that was very integral to Deval Patrick when he was successfully ran for governor. Worked with a lot of different other folks. He was chief of staff to Senator Markey. He was working in Washington, D.C. before his passing. And he was someone who was very helpful to me when I was first running for state representative. I remember him very well, very kind and generous with his time. He actually, he came down to my kickoff event. In fact, he came to one of my first ever campaign meetings that we had at the old hitching post here in Hanson. Back when I was first running. And so sadly, he succumbed to cancer and passed away, and certainly send our best wishes to his son Coleman and the rest of their family. And they had a big celebration of life, which I think is the right way to think about this. And certainly he's someone who will be greatly missed, but certainly not forgotten.
Many of your fans know that you are an amazing author of a couple of books. That maybe there are folks who don't know that you've written a couple of books. One of them actually was part of a state library author talk held at the State House for the Boston Gentlemen's Mob. Tell us a little bit about that experience. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Kevin. So my first book was actually about Alexander Hansen and the town of Hanson, and how it got to be named after this gentleman who had quite an interesting career. And so I did a second one that was about Mariah Chapman and the Boston Gentlemen's Mob, which was an abolition riot back in 1835. So it was kind of an interesting topic. And again, some South Shore connections, because she was from Weymouth. And so I had the opportunity to do a State House author talk just recently, which was a lot of fun. I was actually, sort of a fun little side note, I was actually scheduled to do an author talk on my first book about Alexander Hansen, and it was all ready to go. It was in March of 2020, and everybody knows what happened then. I think my event was one of the first things that got canceled because of COVID. And so I was not able to do the author talk. And so in the interim, I had actually written the second book. And so they invited me back. And so I did an author talk. And it tells a story about William Lloyd Garrison and Mariah Chapman and this abolitionist movement in Boston in the early 19th century. And quite an interesting event that happened on a particular date, October 21st, 1835, when most of the men in Boston rioted against the abolitionists and a small group of women who were meeting to try to advance the cause of abolition. And so this quite an adventure, and I had fun writing about the book. And yeah, it's called The Boston Gentlemen's Mob, Mariah Chapman and the Abolition Riot of 1835.
But you've held author talks at local libraries. This was significantly different, where I'm sure you had some of your colleagues and many folks who were able to and it was televised, I think, around the Commonwealth.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. If folks haven't visited, the State House Library is a beautiful library inside the State House. And it's just a magnificent library. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a little different. I've done some, author talks like at the Hansen Library, which is, great, in the Hansen Senior Center. But this was great because it was at the State House Library. The State House is sort of the historic aspect of it. And it, was televised, and a lot of my colleagues did show up. In fact, a couple of them I put into the show. We did a little, during the presentation, I did a brief dramatization of one event that happened during the book. And so Representative Muratori and Representative Lenatra helped me out with that. And so they were good eggs. So I'd give them a little bit of a plug there for participating. And they didn't really know about it ahead of time either. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And then wrapping up large or wrapping up on top here, let's talk a little bit about the print, the image, which looks like Main Street and maybe Burridge Pond. Am I right?
Yes. I don't know if your viewers can see that, but I wanted to talk about this, and I put it up as my background. So this isn't, so the short version, this is a new painting by Hansen artist Kathy Ferrara, who recently completed it. And it's really about the history of Hansen and the origins. And you can't really see too well because I'm sitting in front of it, but about the cranberry origins of the town of Hansen. It's also got scenes of Burridge Pond, the town hall, really different pieces of Hansen all put together in this wonderful painting. And Kathy Ferrara, who's a well-known artist in Hansen, she did the Thomas Mill. She's done a well-known painting of Hansen Town Hall, a number of different works. We basically commissioned her to do this, and she completed it, and we recently hung it up. It's now on display at the Massachusetts State House. And I think, Kathy's plan is to make some prints of the work and sell them for charity. And I think we're still working out the details about that, but she's going to be doing that. So I wanted to highlight and plug her new work because it's pretty cool. My screen is cutting off part of it, but we'll I'm sure through the magic of technology, you can splash it on the screen while we're talking, right, Kevin? Like maybe here or here or here.
Well, I was thinking even better when we do roll the closing credits. It could be full screen as we recognize the folks behind the scenes.
You can just put it over. Feel free to just put it over my face. That's fine. The people don't need to see me anyway. But it's a pretty cool image, and it's a neat painting. And Kathy did a great job, and we're really proud to have it hanging up at the State House now.
Anything that we haven't touched upon, but you feel is kind of important to share with the viewers, the folks in the 6th Plymouth District?
Gosh, you always ask that. And I feel like there's so many things that I could share. No, I mean, it's a busy time. We're just, as soon as I wrap up the show, we're heading into State House. We have a final a supplemental budget that we're going to hopefully approve today to make sure that we have raises for a number of employees that have been waiting for that, and some other important supplemental budget funding. But no, just if folks have questions or need assistance, again, they're here to help. Go to my website or give our office a call. I have a great team helping both at the State House and in the district. And I'll just give a quick plug. We just hired a new person, Matt Newman from Pembroke, is now working in my State House office, joining Susan Moran, who's our administrative aide in the district from Pembroke as well. Christina Rogers, who's now our researcher from Hanson. So we've got and then Cole Angley, who's our chief of staff from Marshfield. And so we've got just about all the towns covered in the district. Great team, and we're here to help. And if people need assistance with anything, please don't feel shy to reach out.
Well, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again in 2024.
All right, Kevin. Thank you.
You got it. We thank you for tuning into a program like this. If you have any comments or questions, always feel free to drop us a line. Until next time, have a great day.